MS-13 is not just a gang. It is a name that inspires fear across borders, whispered in neighborhoods from Los Angeles to El Salvador, from the suburbs of Long Island to the crowded streets of Honduras. It is a group that has turned tattoos into warnings, hand signs into declarations of war, and violence into a weapon of control. To many, the gang represents the deadliest street-level organization in the world, and its story is one of war, migration, survival, and brutality. To understand how a group of refugee teenagers became one of the world's most feared gangs, we must go back in time. The roots of MS-13 lie in the chaos of the 1980s. El Salvador was in the middle of a bloody civil war, a conflict that killed over 75,000 people and left countless families displaced. In search of safety, tens of thousands fled to the United States, many settling in Los Angeles. But the streets of LA were already dominated by gangs, Mexican, African American, and others, and Salvadoran youth found themselves outsiders, bullied and threatened. Out of this struggle, a small group of young Salvadorans banded together for protection. They called themselves Mara Salvatrucha. Mara meant gang. Salva tied them to their Salvadoran identity, and Trucho implied street smart or sharp. The number 13 connected them to the Mexican mafia, giving them protection inside prisons and marking them as part of a larger underworld family. What began as a brotherhood for survival slowly transformed into something darker. By the 1990s, American authorities began deporting thousands of immigrants with criminal records. Among them were members of MS-13 who had learned gang culture in Los Angeles. When these men were sent back to El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, they carried with them not just tattoos and scars, but the entire culture of violence they had absorbed. In countries already devastated by poverty and weak governments, the deported gang members built new cliques, recruiting local youth and spreading their influence. Prisons in Central America became breeding grounds, and neighborhoods fell under their control. What started in Los Angeles had become a transnational network of organized crime. Unlike traditional mafia structures, MS-13 does not have one supreme boss at the top. Instead, it is made up of local cliques, each semi-independent but united by culture, loyalty, and symbols. These cliques rule through fear, enforcing strict codes of silence. Initiation rituals are brutal. To join, recruits endure the infamous 13-second beating, where they are violently attacked by members for 13 seconds straight. In many cases, new members must commit a murder to prove loyalty. Once inside, leaving is nearly impossible. Tattoos, sometimes covering the entire face, act as both identity and sentence. A man with MS etched across his forehead can never escape his past. The gang's hand signs, graffiti, and coded words maintain the culture across borders, binding scattered cliques together. What truly sets MS-13 apart is its embrace of terror. Violence is not hidden in the shadows but displayed in public. Murders are not just punishments, they are performances. Machete attacks, beheadings, and public executions are meant to terrify entire communities. In El Salvador, entire buses have been set on fire with passengers inside when drivers refuse to pay extortion fees. In the United States, headlines have told chilling stories. Teenagers lured to wooded parks and hacked to death for breaking gang rules. Girls executed by their own peers for disrespecting the gang. These crimes are not random. They are designed to send a message. Anyone who resists will pay with their life. The gang's financial survival depends on crime. In Central America, extortion is their lifeblood. Every business, every bus driver, every street vendor pays what is known as rent. Miss a payment and death soon follows. Beyond extortion, MS-13 profits from drug distribution, human trafficking, kidnapping, arms smuggling, and vehicle theft. In American cities, members have been linked to drug sales, robberies, and murders, while maintaining connections to imprisoned leaders in El Salvador. The gang adapts to each environment, exploiting whatever crimes generate money while maintaining its trademark brutality. Ironically, prisons that were meant to weaken MS-13 often made it stronger. In El Salvador, leaders behind bars continue to run operations with the help of contraband phones and corrupt guards. Some prisons became de facto headquarters for the gang, where leaders controlled not just the inmates but the outside neighborhoods as well. Orders for murders, extortion payments, and recruitment often flow directly from prison cells, making incarceration more of a shield than a punishment. Recruitment is another weapon in the MS-13 arsenal. The gang preys on the vulnerable. Children from broken families, teenagers with no opportunities, and young people desperate for belonging. Schools become hunting grounds for recruiters. For some children, the choice is brutal. Join the gang or face the risk of being killed by it. Once inside, leaving is almost impossible, and those who try often place their entire families in danger. This cycle ensures that generation after generation, fresh recruits keep the gang alive. MS-13's cruelty has shocked the world on many occasions. In Long Island, New York, multiple murders committed by the gang brought fear to immigrant communities. In Central America, countless families have lost loved ones to gang violence, often in the most horrific ways imaginable. Entire communities live under the constant threat of extortion and death. In some neighborhoods, people measure safety not by police patrols, but by whether gang checkpoints are quiet, whether taxis are still running, or whether the local clique has allowed schools to open. For many, life under MS-13 is life under a shadow government. Law enforcement has tried many approaches to dismantle the gang. In the United States, federal authorities have charged members under racketeering laws, building large cases that expose the inner workings of cliques. On the local level, police use intelligence, surveillance, and community policing to disrupt operations. In Central America, governments have waged wars against MS-13. El Salvador's Iron Fist policies led to mass arrests, but the gang survived. More recently, President Nayib Bukele launched a massive crackdown, detaining tens of thousands and confining them in newly built mega-prisons. Murder rates in El Salvador dropped dramatically, but critics warn that mass incarceration without due process risks human rights abuses and may only fuel resentment in the long run. The impact of MS-13 cannot be measured in statistics alone. It is measured in the families forced to flee their homes, the mothers who bury their children, and the young people who grow up with fear as their daily companion. It is measured in communities where silence is the only survival strategy. MS-13 thrives where hope is absent. Where governments fail to provide opportunity, gangs fill the vacuum. Where families are broken, gangs become the substitute. Where safety is missing, MS-13 rules with fear. Experts warn that suppression alone cannot solve the problem. Arrests in prisons can disrupt operations, but they do not address the roots of the gang's power. Poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity feed MS-13 more effectively than any recruiter. Without addressing these deeper issues, new cliques will continue to emerge. That is why many argue the fight against MS-13 requires both toughness and compassion, targeted crackdowns against violent leaders, but also schools, jobs, and communities that give young people a real alternative. The future of MS-13 is uncertain. Technology and international cooperation have made it harder for the gang to operate freely, but as long as poverty and corruption remain, the gang will adapt. In El Salvador, the mega prisons may bring temporary calm, but history has shown that gangs are patient, waiting for their chance to return. In the United States, law enforcement has made progress, but cliques continue to operate, recruiting teenagers and spreading fear. MS-13 is more than just a gang. It is a symbol of what happens when violence, poverty, and neglect collide. It shows us how desperation can give birth to brutality, how trauma can turn into organized crime, and how communities abandoned by governments can fall under the rule of fear. Its story is not just about crime, it is about the failure of societies to protect their most vulnerable. The question is, can MS-13 be stopped? Some believe the answer lies in harsher crackdowns, stronger prisons, and more force. Others argue the real solution lies in prevention, education, and opportunity. One thing is certain. Without addressing the roots of violence, the shadow of MS-13 will not disappear. It may change shape, it may weaken, but it will never truly vanish. And so, the story of MS-13 remains unfinished. It is a reminder of the consequences of war, migration, and neglect. It is a warning to the world of what happens when we fail to give young people hope. And it is a challenge to governments, communities, and all of us, to decide whether the next chapter of MS-13's story will be one of survival or of defeat.